with today. This hour, we are, I don't want to say single-minded and focused because we're going to cover so many different topics, but we've got one crew in the house, and they've got the run of things for the next hour. I want to welcome in Beverly Haydel and Marie Centanni with the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. How y'all doing?
So good. Great. Thanks for having us.
Now, glad to have y'all on here. Glad to be talking about LA23. It's finally here.
I
feel
know.
Like we've been talking about it in the background for, well, literally a year now.
Yes.
So before we get into the individual aspects of it, I want to rewind the clock and talk about what started y'all down this path.
Well, as you know, we are at the bottom of many of the lists that we would prefer to be at the top of.
Yeah.
And when we sat back and looked at the opportunity for change that comes with this 2023 election cycle, new governor, lots of new statewide elected officials, new Bessie members, a ton of new legislators, there's an appetite for change, and there's also an opportunity for change. And so it's a moment you have to seize.
Right.
So Lobby sat back and said, all right, what do we need to do to present a good plan for intelligent conversation and thought-provoking solutions with this new crop of leaders who will elect? Because what we saw in 2019 is when we engaged on things like tort reform, tax reform, there was an attitude of reform. They wanted to champion change. They didn't want the status quo, and they wanted to dig in. So we said, all right, round two, larger scale, what does that look like?
Now, what we've seen from that first round, though, was, I mean, a lot of ideas are already out there.
Yes.
Is this a continuation of those ideas, or are we talking new ideas?
There are some surprising things in this list. It's about 31 recommendations, all 31 flavors of change. And there are some things that are not surprising, especially when you look at the slate of tax recommendations that are put forth. There's some things that we've been calling for years, things like streamlining sales tax collection, reforming the severance tax just to make it a little more predictable, looking at ITEP changes. There are things that are not new, but then there are things that are pretty surprising. And we get into things like, do we need an office of a comptroller? Do we need a statewide cabinet-level office of talent development just to kind of streamline how we do workforce development?
Okay.
Do we need to be providing maternity leave for teachers and some of these other things to really recruit and retain a good workforce?
Do we not provide maternity leave?
Can you believe we don't?
We do not.
People watching online can see how low your jaw is dropping right now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beverly,
other states are doing it, and that's the point.
Yeah.
We may or may not do things. Other states are taking steps to improve, and the longer we don't, the more we're going to get left behind.
Beverly Haydel's with us as well. You headed this thing up, a project director for LA23. In walking through the process, and we're going to get to the actual topics here in just a minute, but in walking through the process, tell me a little what was eye-opening, aside from that, what was eye-opening to you?
I mean, I think, so just to take a step back, we started this really kind of formulating the idea around LA23 back in the fall. I guess it was October, November, when I sat down with the lobby team. From the very outset, I think our vision was that we focused the work around the data. So if you'll remember when you had me on, I guess it was probably 6 to 9 months ago, we were in that data deep dive process where we looked at how does Louisiana stack up against all the other states. I think we always knew that we were at the bottom of most lists, but I think when you got down to the granular level, it was really shocking in terms of how far behind we are lagging, especially states like Florida and Texas, who have really surged coming off the COVID pandemic. I think following the data deep dive, we then spent at least 2 or 3 months moving around the state, meeting with different business leaders. I think you and I talked a couple times during that process. We sent out a survey to all 2,000 lobby members and local chambers. And I think another surprising thing was that everything that we heard from the business community completely echoed what we saw reflected in the data. Workforce rose to the top of the list in terms of the number one challenge facing every business across the state, whether it's a small mom and pop shop that's just trying to hire 2 or 3 people, to our largest employers like healthcare providers, manufacturing companies. So that process of stakeholder engagement really gave us our focus areas, and the 4 that you see that came through in the final report are the things that we heard the people in this state want us to focus on.
And if you want to play it along at home with the at-home version, it's LA23.org. LA23.org is the website that breaks down all of it, which, by the way, is a lot of reading. as
It
I
is.
dug in on this.
It's deep.
But you know what? It's a page turner.
Yes.
I don't think that I've ever read a policy document that I couldn't put down like this. It's compelling.
It's so true, though.
It's compelling. It's well laid out. And to Beverly's point, this is a plan specific to Louisiana. It's not a wish list of things like, wouldn't it be nice if we had,
Okay.
all of
Yes.
this stuff. It's where are we lacking?
Right.
And where do we have opportunity to really excel and lead? And that's where the focus is.
Yes, and then there's direction to get there as well.
Yes.
We have a ton of good ideas all the time, and they're just kind of.
And you'll see a lot of those echoed here.
Yes.
There are plans circulating now by like-minded groups. You'll see a lot of overlap with what we're calling for here.
And Brian, you'll see throughout the report, and this really kind of goes to our other lead consultant on the project, Ted Abernathy, who's worked with state chambers, economic development agencies around the country. One of the things he told us from the very beginning was that you can't just list out a bunch of recommendations and then expect, the next set of legislators to go and turn those into action. You need to go down to the next level and give them real-world examples of other states, other organizations that are already doing these things. There's no need for us to completely reinvent the playbook. So one of the things that I think makes this report unique is that for every policy area, we not only give a recommendation, but we talk about other states that are already doing it.
Right.
And we point our elected officials in that direction. That doesn't mean we have to take exactly what they're doing and do it the same way here, but we know we have a starting point and something to look to.
No, yeah. So when you have an area you want to go to, it's how do you get there? If other states have provided a template, you don't have to follow. If I can make it about Louisiana, you don't have to follow a recipe
That's right.
directly. You can
Right.
tinker with the recipe,
We all
add your own
do.
ingredients. Yes, exactly. All right, we've got a couple minutes before our first break. So let's start off with education and workforce development, one of the areas that this report tackles. From the website, it says past reform efforts have elevated Louisiana as a leader in education policy. The work done in Orleans Parish post-Katrina, the increase in access to high-quality early childhood programs and services, and innovative initiatives in career and technical education like Jumpstart all prove Louisiana's credibility as a leading state for education reform. I'm going to pause right there to get back into where we're headed from there. When it comes to education, we have seen some modest increases.
Yes.
Dr. Cade Brumley's taken a lot on from COVID till now, to be sure. Where are we, and where do we need to be?
Yeah, so I'll start off and then Marie can add in. I think one of the things we wanted to make sure we did in this report is point out the areas where we think we have made some gains over the past years. It's not all doom and gloom. I think education, and particularly early childhood education, is one of those areas where Cade and his team and John White and his team before that got it right. We have a great governance structure in place. We've seen the legislature continue to double down on early childhood funding. So I think we have a lot of good things to build on. I would say two things that really kind of jumped out at me in the education section. One is talking about accountability. We have a good accountability system in place, but we've seen the Bessie board and some of our leadership look to take a step back over the past year or two, especially in terms of high school graduation and what is required to get a diploma in this state.
Right.
So we really push on the Bessie board in this report to continue to up our game, raise the bar, and make sure that it's a pretty rigorous process for a kid to get a high school diploma in the state of Louisiana. I think the other thing that we really focus on is the intersection between high school education and workforce. Ted dives into the data around our labor force participation rates. We're lagging behind tremendously, and we've got to get more kids into the workforce, and high schools are a perfect pipeline to do that. So we talk a lot here about getting our juniors and seniors into a place of work through an internship or apprenticeship. Other states around the country are doing a fabulous job at that. Mm-hmm. I know that Cade and his team are really focused on this. It's a priority for them. So it's really just moving to implementation at this point. Because we know that if we want to get more people in the workforce, our high schools are our best option.
We're talking with Beverly Haydel and Marie Centanni from the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, talking about the LA23 report, which is out. It's available. I'll post the link up in our Facebook Live feed so it's easier to get to. When it comes to education, when it comes to workforce development specifically, and this is a question I've asked when the Baton Rouge Area Chamber talks about it, when Dr. Brumley talks about it, how do we work that balance between developing a workforce and not treating our kids like they're just being pushed through a system that's pushing them into the workforce? Like, they're still kids.
Sure.
Like, how do you work that balance?
This report focuses on, making the most of education to make sure you're ready for life.
Right.
So I think that's a gift to give any child. I don't know when, at what point in your education you knew you wanted to be in radio.
About 3 weeks ago.
Well, exactly. If we are able to, I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid at the Board of Regents a few months ago, and I said, if you had a magic wand and you could do anything to change any aspect of education, what would you change? She said, early exposure to career options.
That's the answer.
And that's what it is. It's not saying we need everybody to be a cog in the wheel and, you are assigned this role, you must take this job upon graduation. It's, are you ready? And are we giving you that gift of readiness? And so we're looking at things like, are children ready to start learning when they enter kindergarten? Are elementary school students ready for that next level? Are high school students ready for what comes next? And are college and other post-secondary students ready for life after that? And who's ready for life before that? And really, when you get into the adult population, are we providing enough opportunities to reskill and upskill so that they are constantly able to take advantage of what's offered in terms of opportunity?
All right, we're going to break here. I'm not done with education, but we do have to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue with the education part, but we're also going to get into the business climate a little bit as well, because, after all, doesn't everything kind of start with, having – you train a workforce, but if you don't have the business climate for them to work, then you're just training them to go work somewhere else. So we will continue that. We got LABI in the house for the entire hour, breaking down the LA23 report. Beverly, Haydel, Marie Centanni. I'm Brian Haldane. We'll continue next on Talk 107.3. And we're off and running.
Yay!
One of the things we really is kind of a hot topic, I think, is the top stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Tops?
There's a lot of just
We push on there to kind of reevaluate tops and to look at what it takes to qualify for tops, whether we should better align tops with our workforce needs. So maybe you get more tops money if you're going into a high demand profession, and also making sure that we're rewarding the kids who actually graduate with tops.
So if we're looking for more healthcare workers, if we're looking for more educators, are we incentivizing that?
That's just not, right. Which tops has always been kind of a sacred cow that no one wants to
Don't touch
suggest
tops.
reforming. So it's kind of, we felt like it was kind of bold to go.
I stopped talking about tops because I want to stay right where it's at.
Yeah, right. No, I know.
And that's what everybody
I know.
says. Yep.
Business climate, obviously, we recommend looking at fuel tax increase.
Which is new.
Yeah. And, yeah.
You don't have to mention that if you don't want to.
No, it's fine.
Or we can. Your people are driving.
Sorry, I forgot to share the Facebook Live this morning. .718 Talk 107.3 FM WBRP. Mornings with Brian Haldane rolling right along. We've got Beverly Haydel and Marie Centanni in from the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry as the LA23 report is out. It is consumable. It is, as Marie said in our last segment, it's actually a really good read. I'm not all the way done with it. I started digging, the weekend, but we had,
Well, the
we
old
had a day game.
fashions that slows you
I
down.
might have had an old fashioned or two last night for sure, but and that was after a game day. So, you get an early morning kickoff, you get drowsy on late Saturday.
Imagine.
So, let's talk about continuing to talk about education. Can we talk about higher education for just a minute? Y'all took a very good look at tops.
Yeah.
Walk me through where we want to go.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So, we looked at all of the financial aid packages out there, TOPS being one of many. So we kind of list them, and TOPS is obviously the one that's most important to families in Louisiana. And we certainly agree that it's a great resource. What we encouraged our lawmakers to do in the next administration is to just sort of take a fresh look at TOPS. Obviously, it's a huge investment of taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure that the state is getting the best return on that investment. Some of the things that we suggest are looking at how you could have a dynamic TOPS funding model that tries to align that financial aid with the workforce needs of the state. For example, Marie mentioned earlier healthcare workforce. It's a huge area of need throughout the state. Our largest employers are healthcare providers, and they're in desperate need of more people in those fields. Why not look at how we can incentivize our TOPS recipients to go into those high-demand fields? That's certainly not to say that every student has to, go into a high-demand field. We want our young people to do what they love and what they're passionate about and what they're going to be great at. But I do think that it's a good way to look at making more efficient use of our taxpayer dollars.
Well, yes, because if it's a high-demand field, it is, if you'll pardon the phrase, it's a useful degree. Like
sure.
we carry Dave Ramsey from 1 to 4 right here, and he's chock full of phone calls of people like, I got $250,000 worth of student loans to pay back.
Can't find a job.
I studied art therapy.
Right.
And I'm not dissing art therapy. I'm just it as an example. But if you're going into a high demand field, and in today's world, there's nothing saying you have to do that for the rest of your life. That's the accelerator that gets you through college and into the workforce after that, and then you go from there wherever you want. But it maximizes TOPS's ROI as well. Now, how do we make that translate to, yes, we are funneling you into a high demand, not funneling, we're helping nudge along the way towards a higher demand field. How do we make sure that pays off with a higher demand field in Louisiana?
Yeah, I mean, we don't go so far as to say, and I know there have been discussions over the years about requiring TOPS recipients to stay in Louisiana for a period of time after they graduate. I don't think that's really practical. I also think that if we do the other things that we recommend in this report, improve the quality of life, improve our infrastructure, improve our business climate, we should create an environment where the people coming out of our universities want to stay here. They can get a good, high-paying job here. I don't think we want to force it upon them. But I do think that, as I said earlier, we want to take a fresh look at TOPS. We want to make sure it's rigorous enough that we're getting the highest and best use of our taxpayer dollars. Another thing that we recommend is considering financial need in terms of how much TOPS money individuals get. We have other financial need programs like Pell Grants and Go Grants, but we think maybe financial need should be added to the mix in terms of TOPS as well.
And I would say on the graduates who have moved out of state to find that job, and sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes when you pick a field that has a certain expertise, and there might be one region of the country where you can get really good experience in that field, we want you to come back. Mm-hmm. We want you to get that experience, bring that expertise back to Louisiana, because we have created these things that attract you. But to that end, we're looking at a couple of things that might incentivize people to come home, like really focusing on what we found is we've lost talent to Texas, Mississippi, the Memphis region, kind of targeting those areas to invite people back home. And once they get here, there was a program in Ohio called Grants for Grads, where it's a little bit of a home ownership incentive to make it easier for you to move home and come, plant your flag here and start your career.
Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't put together those three. You mentioned 2 states and a city right there. You said Texas, you said Mississippi, and you said the Memphis area.
Memphis region.
Memphis region would be Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Texas has no state income tax. Tennessee, and now Memphis is on the way there. So
nice
I feel
segue.
Like, thank
nice
you,
segue.
Right?
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good chance to pivot over.
I was wondering how long it was going to take to get you to income taxes.
Well, you know what? If we're going to talk taxes, we might as well start with that one. It's the biggest one. And you talk about, if we talk about TOPS with it's what's comfortable, right? The state income tax, we have so many workarounds.
Yeah.
That, and not the least of those is the homestead exemption. We have so many workarounds that make it difficult to remove or put ourselves on a path of getting rid of the state income tax. Is this something that LA23 found we want to do? And if so, how do we do it?
Well, we absolutely recommend moving to a low flat income tax and or eventually repealing the income tax. I think, all of us who are pretty well versed in tax policy and have followed what the legislature has done over the past couple of years, who made some great strides a couple of years ago with income tax reform. I think a lot of people want that to be our goal for the exact reason you said, to make us more competitive with states like Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. We know that it won't be easy to get there. We know there will be trade-offs involved, and we acknowledge and recognize those trade-offs in here. We can't just go whop the income tax and figure out after the fact how we're going to make up that revenue. Mm-hmm. So we will have to be talking about things like sales tax, consumption tax. We talk about the fuel tax in here. The other thing that we really talk about and kind of delve into is that relationship between state and local government and what revenue can the locals make up on their own that the state has currently been providing to them. So pretty complex issues, some of which will require opening up the Constitution and looking at how we change that. But we do think that the ultimate goal should be getting rid of the income tax.
Okay, so opening up the Constitution, the relationship between state government and local government, these are all things that have been, let's just call it a soapbox for a little while.
Yeah.
To flush the state constitution to start over with. How close does LA23 get us to making that a reality? Because to me, it feels like almost an inevitability.
You know, that's what comes next in terms of implementing this plan. Certain recommendations are things that let's say the next governor can tackle with their transition team and how they set up their cabinet.
Right.
Some of these things need to be taken on by Bessie, some by the Board of Regents, some legislatively. And when it comes to the tax policy, our tax system is so complex and intertwined. And, you know, as Jim Patterson said last week, it's a lot of split the baby compromises. That when you're talking math doesn't always work out, you know. So what I love about the deep dive on the tax reform, and I should mention that, there's the LA23 report, and then when you go online, there's a deep dive on education policy, and there's a deep dive on tax. It explains so much about why we have certain policies in place and things to consider, like should it be a constitutional convention? Because let's say each one of these things needs to be a constitutional amendment. What if you have a set of 6 and only 2 pass?
Right.
But you require all of them to pass in order to keep that delicate balance.
Right, which is what we've done so many times in the past that we end up somehow making it worse. And eventually you're like, just if you find
leave it alone.
If you find yourself in a hole, you put down the shovel.
Right.
So yeah, it would take a lot of scrubbing from the start and not piecemealing it together because we're going to get the wrong pieces.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, obviously that'll be set sort of by the leadership in the governor's office, depending on whoever that is, and how willing they are to have that conversation about constitutional change. I know you know this, but, you know, if we have a legislature and a governor that are really bold, you do have the ability to go in and completely rewrite an article of the Constitution, whether that's Article 6, Article 7, that's related to taxation and revenue, and rewrite an entire article and put it to the voters as a single constitutional amendment. I learned that from the folks over at PAR. And so, you know, if we get a set of leaders who's really bold and wants to take on 7 or 8 of these recommendations around tax reform and do it in one fell swoop, I mean, the option is out there.
We got Maurice Centanni and Beverly Haydel from the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry as we're talking about the new strategic plan. LA23 is out there, and we're all going to the polls in less than a month.
Yes.
We'll talk about that end of it before the hour is over with. But we're all going to the polls in less than a month, and we're looking at rerouting Louisiana, if you will. There's a whole road theme built into this.
Take the wheel.
Yeah,
Steer us in the right direction.
They've got road cones and everything as part of the promotion and launch and whatnot. Keeping with taxes, though, and we got 2 minutes till break. So we have to talk ITEP. What did y'all find, and where do we need to go?
I think, you know, that is nothing new there. We need to provide predictability so that businesses walking through that exercise can have a little bit of a known entity into how that process works and what the outcome could be. But when it varies parish to parish and taxing authority to taxing authority, it just becomes a minefield for them to navigate. And so what we're recommending is that we look at how to streamline it, how to make it a little bit more of a uniform process. But, you know, in the end, we have to back it up and say, why do we have things like ITEP? Why do we have to have all these exemptions and bells and whistles? Wouldn't it be great if our tax structure was just good and we didn't have to entice you with something like that, you know?
I mean, but how do you get beyond the whole,
2 minutes.
That would be great, wouldn't it? And then everybody shrugs and we all just move on.
Right.
And when it comes to making ITEP like simpler across the board, I mean, the whole point of ITEP is to attract local jobs to localities. So should it be up to the localities to help run with what they want to run with?
Oh, sure. You know, I think the phrase has been used, you're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube on that one. Like
Right.
Once local control has been brought into the mix, you can't take that away, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But how that process plays out is really where the heartburn is.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, part of the reason that we decided from the very beginning to bring in a consultant like Ted from out of state who works around the country is to make sure we were getting that independent judgment, that fresh set of eyes, as it relates to, and his firm does a lot of site selection, so they're used to looking at things like ITEP. From the outset, he told us, ITEP is critical. Lobby has been saying this, of course, for decades.
Right.
But to hear him say how critical that is and how important it is as we compete against states like Texas, it was reaffirming.
We're not done with this one. We'll pick it up after news. I got to jump in, though, because we got ABC News coming your way. Right now, it's 7:30. So if
Right
you're
on
watching
time.
on Facebook Live, this is the first of like 82 hours worth of discussion.
So much.
We'll be spending the night here talking
Yes.
about LA23.
There's so much in it. It's good, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So normally Sunday night is reserved just for show prep, so that I can start my Monday off right. My wife is directing part of this Catholic ministry called Acts.
Yeah. She's doing an extra treat?
Yes. We're,
That's a
so
time
we
commitment.
Directed one
Really?
at Mercy,
I didn't know
and
that.
then she's directing a mission retreat to bring Acts to in the parish. Well, her meetings are on Sunday nights.
Oh, Lord.
So all of us husbands got together, bring the kids over to want to pick somebody's house, and it's like, all right, all the wives are having their Acts meetings. Let's go ahead and eat. So
Have your own extra treat.
So that's why you only
The
made it
ladies
halfway through
auxiliary.
LA23.
It's fine. It's fine. Colby. Can I see the pictures?
so yeah, I had General So alligator last night.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that it says. I was going to say try to get one where it said Brian Haldane on the screen. Good job.
That was fun. It's just not as good
Perfect.
with the computers.
I like it with the computer though. That's nice. Makes them look fancy because they are. Yeah, where you want to go next? Where you want to go next? So fancy.
Not quite done with taxes just yet.
Cool.
Yeah, we're probably going to skip right ahead to business climate and then circle back to public safety just because that's, play the hits.
Yeah. Can't believe we've been talking about this. We still have so much to talk about.
And then after today, we're probably going to have to pause to talk about nothing but elections in the L segment of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are they trying to do with City Park Golf Course?
Get rid of it.
Why?
Make it more of like a central park.
I mean, that would be beautiful. As long as they keep it as an open
Great
space.
place to sell fentanyl.
That's what I was looking for. We lived right by Our Lady of Mercy. And we were, before we moved to Lafayette, we were looking for our next house. And that's the neighborhood we were really looking in. We almost bought one. Mm-hmm.
We love it in Mercy. We love the whole mid-city vibe. We live out in Sherwood, though. We live 2 blocks from St. Thomas More.
Okay.
We would have gone to St. Thomas More if they hadn't been so starting that tour.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, they were downright rude.
It's amazing how that can shape your decision. Yeah.
When one of the volunteer parents tells me and my wife, well, if you both work, there's no way you'll be able to meet up with the volunteer requirements we have here. Really?
That's a subtle threshold for us. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So then we went over to Mercy, and turned out.
we have 2 parents working.
I know. We went over to Mercy, and there's been no shortage of volunteering by either one of us. But when we went to Mercy, Kerrigan, who was now a junior in high school, fell in love with the campus.
Yeah.
It reminded me and Christy of like the Catholic elementary schools in Metairie that we grew up with. And then the clincher, the deacon at Our Lady of Mercy, was my 9th grade basketball coach and taught me calculus my senior year.
Oh, that's nice.
I don't get into LSU without him giving me a makeup.
Yeah. Our girls were baptized there. We lived on South Ardenwood.
Okay.
So we were
Yeah.
ready to have them walk to school and everything. Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
that was a good one.
Well, Cleo yesterday. So,
There's the readings in the gospel are always the same, but the homily, it's up to the.
priest takes it in his own direction for the homily, but the readings are the same. Okay. Yeah, Cleo kept, instead of saying the gospel was about, do I forgive someone 7 times? And Jesus says
70 times.
7 something.
Yeah.
So Father Cleo was saying, forgive them 7 times 77. So I spent the whole.
That's what I thought it was. It was
It's not.
normally it's 7 times 77.
Right, but
the
reading
version
itself
today
says
was
77.
77.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yesterday.
I was so distracted the whole homily.
Doing that math.
Right, number 539. 539 if you're doing the math, which I did rather than listening to what he's trying to say.
I couldn't listen. I looked down on the ground and I could see all of these dead grasshoppers. And I was like, what is happening? Like crickets.
Oh, Lafayette's got a cricket thing going on right
And
now.
then I walked outside and I could hear them. I was like, what is going on? And then in the paper I read today, because it's been so dry, there's like a cricket infestation. It's
Yeah.
like the plague.
You know, that happens in Texas sometimes. Like, there's during the summer, it'll just be like attack of the crickets, and it's terrible.
When
Look,
we
KATC had a story last week
about how bad
about
it is. I was looking. I was like, what is going on? When Justin and I lived in D.C., it was the 17-year cicadas. And then we got married, and then for our 17th anniversary, we forgot. We're like, these are our babies. Like it was like they're back. Remember 17 years ago?
Yeah.
We're like, wait.
Byron says on Facebook Live, I just went outside to water some plants, and it's downright delightful out there. I edited for air. It is downright delightful out there. Let's hear your full forecast from WBRZ meteorologist Emma Kate Cowan. Well, he says
Flat out.
freaking delightful.
It's flat out.
Amazing today.
Awesome. Yeah, you need a little jacket or something. It's all good.
All right, let me close my education page, keep the tax page open, and move over to...
Isn't the website fun?
Yeah.
I love how it moves. LA 368 here in Baton Rouge. Kenny Wynn did it.
Okay.
Very cool. And there's a lot in the Take Action tab, like when we get to the end to talk about.
Okay.
Your bumper music's awesome.
That's all Alondra.
I like the Led Zeppelin.
I very rarely make it.
February usually.
Yeah. Coming up on 738 at Talk 107.3 FM WBRP, our deep dive into LA23 continues. We got the folks from the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry as our guests this morning, Beverly, Haydel, Marie Centanni. We've been talking about education. We've been talking about taxes. We got to talk about the business climate overall. But let me remind you, LA23.org is the website. LA23.org is the website. And when I tell you, like, once you start digging in, I mean, you want to talk about going down a rabbit hole. This is going down a rabbit hole. This is like
Deep in the Warren.
I really like. You can either send me to this or tell me Bob Ross was a serial killer. Either way, I'm going and I'm
How did we
finding more.
get there, Brian?
I don't really know.
Happy little tax policy.
Yeah.
Happy little.
No, there's somebody out there that says every painting he has is a scene where he's buried a victim.
Stop it.
Seriously. All right, let's get back on task. You see why we're at the bottom of all the lists. We can't stay on task. All right, let's talk a little bit about, actually, before we wrap up on the tax policy here, I did want to dive into the fuel tax, because that seems to be an odd recommendation, but there's something there. There's reason behind it.
Absolutely. Again, it's a delicate balance of the whole tax environment. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at the fuel tax, it hasn't been increased since, 1990? And we, just as a state, need a steady funding mechanism for transportation and infrastructure. And if we're not paying the fuel tax, what are we paying for as a result of not having sound infrastructure? We're paying for wear and tear on our vehicles. We're paying for time lost in traffic in the commute. We are seeing the negative results of not investing in infrastructure. So at some point, it's just time.
So often, anybody who doesn't actually read and dial in would just take a look at someone like a group like Lobby and like, oh, they're just here for business and want to slash everything else. This is so much more introspective.
Yes.
To make sure everyone is served.
Yes.
So,
And overall, that's a good point. The plan really does look at, the structure of so many things that cause negative results to come out in Louisiana. The tax structure, the workforce development structure, our economic development structure. What are the things we can realign and retool just to allow things to flourish a little bit better?
Yeah.
And a lot better. Because by 2030, the ultimate goal is that we will be the top tier economic leader in the South.
Yes, that would be the hope. But we got a lot of ground to make up and a lot of folks to pass up in order to get there. I'll take every ounce that we can get on the way. Economic development. Let's talk about improving economic development. There are a number of different steps. Well, you got 5 steps posted up here. Simplifying ITEP was one that we talked about in our tax segment. What else do we need to know about when it comes to economic development?
Well, there are things that make sense. Like, are we really taking periodic looks at our suite of incentives, our portfolio of incentives, and making sure that it is up to date, that it's incentivizing the right things, and that it's really flexible as new technology develops, new industries emerge? Or are we really set up to attract the businesses we want to attract?
How do we do that and stay ahead of the curve at the same time? Because a lot of that would have to be reactive, wouldn't it?
In terms of the incentives?
Yeah. In terms of the
absolutely.
industries.
Absolutely. I think some of it is looking back, but a lot of it is looking at the industries that are going to drive our economy going forward. I think particularly as you think about the energy industry, that's just one that comes to mind. We see tons of transition happening there, whether it's carbon capture or some of the other new technologies. We need to make sure that our tax structure is serving those companies that are doing that work and bringing jobs to our state and incentivizing them to be in Louisiana. One of the other things we talk about in economic development is really just this idea of having state government, local governments, local economic development agencies all on the same plan, firing on the same cylinders. I think we heard when we moved around the state and talked not only to business leaders but the people running those local chambers, economic development organizations, that there has been a lack of a cohesive strategic plan around economic development. And looking as a state at what are the industries that can drive our growth and drive jobs going forward, and making sure that we're all working off the same playbook. And so we have some recommendations around that type of kind of structural reform in the report as well.
Okay, so there's a little bit of, like, how do you balance that with making things more regional? Like, to have a cohesive statewide plan, but also expand on regional approaches.
Well, I think if you have the right leadership in place at the state level, those partnerships between the state and regional economic development agencies just seem natural and they work. So I think it starts with state government, but absolutely we need the regional folks to be, sending their feedback up, and we need to be listening to them in terms of what's going to drive growth in their community. So I do think it's a delicate balance, but I think that if we have the right leadership at the state level, we can make it happen.
We got Beverly, Haydel, and Marie Centanni from the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. Normally I tell you to go to labi.org. Today I'm telling you to go to LA23.org to dig in on the LA23 plan. One of the points within the economic development is to review existing state economic development programs with regional partners across the state. Throughout the research, throughout the year that y'all have put into making sure that this thing is ready for prime time, there have to be a few programs that have come up as the best and a few that have come up as let's get rid of them. Have y'all been given examples along the way already to know where we're at with what is working?
In terms of programs that are already operating within the state?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that did come up in some of our conversations. I think one of the things that we heard that people would like to see more of, and we mentioned this specifically in one of our recommendations, is around kind of competitive grants that go to local economic development agencies for things like site development, site readiness. I think it was Representative Bagley had a program year before last that got some funding, maybe $8 to $10 million. I think local economic development organizations respond well when they have the ability to design their own programs and step up and get funding for that in partnership with the state. So that's certainly something that we would like to see expanded going forward.
There's been a lot of talk about what is eventually going to start being called the Big Four for the states without an income tax that we're trying to compete with, because we talk about Texas, we talk about Florida, we talk about Tennessee, we talk about Mississippi. It still hurts.
They're doing things.
I know. Anyway, it stings. It hurts to have to look up at them. Anyway, that's why we take our aggression out on Saturday. But how often do we get outside of the Southeast for comps? How often do we get outside of the Southeast to see who else is doing great things out there that we can bring back home and model?
Pretty often. And if you look, on LA23.org, in the Take Action section, first of all, as Beverly said earlier, every time we make a recommendation, the report is peppered with states doing it well and examples of programs that are really, really working. But specifically, we pulled them all out because they're so good. So if you go to that Take Action section, there is a menu of resources for you to share the program with your legislators, download a voter guide and understand how to engage with candidates when they knock on your door. But also, those state examples are separated out in a nice document. It's about 6 pages. I would call it a one-pager, but it's 6 pages. But you can look if you want to skip to that part and see some of the things that other states have done. We've laid it out for you.
How close are we to hitting overdrive when it comes to economic development? Because I feel like we have, even without a lot of the tax stuff that has to be done, and the path that we're on, we're not there yet, but the path we're on the education front, when it comes to economic development, we can score some wins, and success begets success. We can score some wins and get ourselves rolling rather quickly without gutting the Constitution, although I still want to. But we can get on that road very, very quickly. How close are we?
Yeah, no, I think of all these areas, I think economic development is one of the ones where, like I said, with the right leadership in place within LED and at the regional economic development agencies, we can have sort of some early and big wins. And one of the things that Ted talked to us about as we were working on this report is that a lot of stuff around economic development is just how you are viewed as a state. You get a couple of big wins early in the next administration, attract some good companies. That sort of makes other companies perk up and say, oh, like, what's going down in Louisiana? Like, we need to be a part of that. So I think part of that is, like, creating some early momentum, and not all of those things have to be done legislatively. A lot of them are stuff that can happen within the agency of LED with the right leadership in place.
That's going to walk us up to action items and next steps and whatnot. So we'll push pause on that. We also need to talk safety and resiliency. And we're less than a month away from, every election in the state. How do we make this translate over this period of time? It's 7:47 at Talk 107.3 FM. We've got one segment to go with Beverly and Marie from LABI. We'll continue next on Talk 107.3. Can you just play the break? Instead of the break playing on the back end, I'm sorry, I meant to tell you that beforehand. Instead of the break playing on the back end of Your Money Now, I wanted to play here. Shoot, that's going to throw us off on timing. Okay.
Damn it, Brian.
That's completely my fault.
It's because
so sorry.
you brought up Bob Ross. You cursed yourself.
I did.
I wish I had a mastery of the stats like Ted does. I know. He could throw out a stat for every question you're answering. Just to be average. Just to be average. And so that, when you're talking about economic development and companies looking to locate here, is the working age population, the talent pool that they would be tapping into to employ. Where is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, if you have to pause and I need to knock out a promo, I can do that instead. Since I screwed up, I can make this out of this hole.
Fix it, Brian.
28 seconds is the exact amount of time it takes to talk about one of these two promos. Oh, hell. Am I promoing after my own spot?
Did you talk
Okay.
to Jude?
No problem. Okay.
Maybe he's not in favor of the gas tax.
We're going to get you to Your Money Now coming up in just a little bit. Our conversation with LABI is not quite done. Before we get you to Your Money Now, Talk 107.3 FM and Citizens Bank and Trust are looking for the ultimate tailgate. Snap a pic of your setup and upload it to talk1073.com for a chance to win a $500 Rouse's gift card. Our judges will select a winner on September 29th. It's the ultimate tailgate giveaway from Rouse's Markets, Citizens Bank and Trust, and Talk 107.3. All right, we'll pick back up with the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry right after we check traffic and Your Money Now on Talk 107.3. Not in that order. I'm an idiot. Hey, kill off the mics for a second. .753 Talk 107.3 FM WBRP. We've got 7 minutes to go with Beverly and Marie from Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. We've been talking about the roadmap. We've been talking about the strategic plan. It's LA23, and it's available right now, LA23.org. Okay, we've got way too much to try and manage this in the last segment.
Are you saying you want us on again?
Yes, I absolutely
good.
am. 100%.
I accept your invitation.
This is the first of like 900 hours of conversation, to be sure. Safety and resiliency, I don't want to overlook it, but I want to make sure we talk about this year's elections. So,
yeah, I mean, so as you know, this is not an area that Lobby has historically, offered a ton of content on, although we've always recognized how important it is. As we moved around the state early in this process, I mentioned workforce and education as top issues for the business community. I would put safety right up there with them. And what we heard really is that public safety has become an economic development issue. So we felt that it was critical to offer some recommendations. Just really quick, we hit on kind of three major themes in the report. The first is making sure that we are investing ample resources in dealing specifically with violent crime, because we know, especially in places like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Monroe, my hometown, was just listed as, I think, the second most dangerous city in the country. So we know that we have to double down on violent crime and have hotspot teams and really dig into best practices there. The other thing is around judicial transparency. This is a topic that Lobby has talked about. We issued a set of research papers that I worked on, I think, year before last. But we need the general public to know what our judges and what our prosecutors are doing as it relates to violent criminals. Mm-hmm. We have elected judges in this state. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So at a minimum, we need to make sure that the voters understand which judges are letting violent offenders out early and which are not. And then the last thing is just recognizing that mental health is a huge component of public safety. And so encouraging our legislature and the leaders at state agencies to provide the right set of resources and tools to local governments to have those wraparound services.
The mental health aspect of this is one that's growing as you can't blame everything on COVID, but COVID really pulled back the curtain on kicked over. That's a way better analogy. Kicked over the ant pile with how much so many people are struggling, and the more isolated we are, the more exacerbated that gets.
Yeah, and I think all of these issues are really ripe for action and reform, and Marie will talk a little bit about that in terms of next session. But we've already heard candidates out there for governor talking about having a special session devoted solely to public safety. And so we hope that all of the recommendations we have here can be part of that conversation in early 2024.
Talk about that special session. If it's going to be called for, it's going to be called for by those we vote for this coming, next month.
Right.
End of this month, actually, everything really gets rolling. How do we take LA23 and make it apply in this shorter period of time?
Good question. So we are starting actually today to engage with legislators, both incumbents and candidates, to walk them through the plan, give them this gift of direction, because, out on the campaign trail, you hear them talking about wanting to change. We've got to keep our best and brightest in Louisiana. We've got to make sure that our next generation is here, that we have the quality of life to keep our children and our grandchildren in the state, make sure that they want to live, work, and raise a family here. This is the how. And this is practical steps they can take, that they want to take. And we've, in fact, the day we launched it, had legislators signing up to author bills already. So it's going to take a lot of engagement with, on our part, with stakeholders around the state, university presidents, on up to the cabinet. And really, hopefully, we'll have a seat at a transition team moving forward as we start to implement it. But in the meantime, what we've done for voters, and again, I'll mention that Take Action section on the website, there's a voter guide that walks through questions that you need to be asking candidates. The questionnaires start flying after qualifying, especially now that all of the candidates have to list their email address on their qualifying form. And they're answering questions from special interest groups, constituencies, all across the state. We want voters to be asking questions to the same degree. So when someone knocks on your door and they're asking for your vote, don't give it away until you feel like they are ready to take on some of these issues, because these are the issues that will position Louisiana to be the leader that we should be.
And this is one of my biggest. Your vote needs to be earned.
Yes, earn it.
Don't just stand there and nod. You can ask questions and you can demand answers. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable, because all so often we get sound bites face to face.
Right.
What we see on TV is no different than we get in person. And then there's wait, stop, expound on that. We never have the follow-up question.
Right.
And we have the ultimate amount of time to do so, and we have their attention.
And they need your vote.
Exactly. So take action within the whole report.
Yes. LA23.org, take action, and then you can find the voter guide in that list of resources.
We have 1 minute till news. What did I miss?
Goodness. I would say just read the report.
Yeah, there's 31 very specific recommendations, tons of content. I think we feel like this is certainly the most comprehensive body of policy work that Lobby has ever been a part of. And one of the things we didn't mention is that, there are other groups out there that have said a lot of the things we've said in here, whether it's PAR, cable. You've read some of those reports. Part of this next phase of work, too, will be sitting down with other like-minded organizations that share our views on some of these policy ideas and figuring out how we build those coalitions. Lobby will champion some of the things in here going forward during the legislative session. Others, we will want someone else to champion, and we provide the support. So moving to that implementation phase is where we head next.
LA23.org is the website, LA23.org. First of many conversations. I guarantee y'all, this is not where we ended. It's just where we have to push pause for this particular hour. Marie, Beverly, thank y'all so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Fantastic stuff. I can't wait till the next one.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank y'all.